having a life scholarship and being able to afford to go to college made me feel inspired to go.
When I got a life scholarship, it was such a relief.
I knew that I wanted to have an impact. Having a life scholarship through the SC Education Lottery was huge. It gave me the opportunity to make that impact right here at home.
The South Carolina Education Lottery. A better you, a better us, a better South Carolina. Visit sceducationlottery.com/betteryou.
This is your before and after story. Southeastern College can help you prepare for a secure and fulfilling career in the growing healthcare field. We offer a wide range of careers to choose from. So whether you want to be a medical assistant, medical billing and coding specialist, nurse, surgical technologist, or another healthcare career, we've got you covered. Become a vital part of a healthcare team and make a real difference. Southeastern College, your future is bright. Visit sec.edu to get started.
You are now listening to the Someone's Favorite Productions podcast network.
Hello there, and welcome back to the Disc Connected, here with Omar and Ranjit, who are the founders behind a company that I sincerely hope everybody hears a lot more about for this year. That is the Cloud Door. Gentlemen, thanks for making time for this.
Hey, thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
The first thing that we should do is define what the Cloud Door is, and it is an upcoming boutique company that is releasing a Kickstarter for everybody to donate to. Omar, can you share where the name the Cloud Door came from?
Yeah, so the name itself comes from a short Money Call film. It's kind of experimental film, which actually Ranjit did a screening of the Cloud Door at was it in Stuttgart, was it, or Frankfurt? I can't remember.
It was the year before last. I did one in London at the Garden Cinema, which is a new cinema in Covent Garden, and yeah, we did one together in Frankfurt as well.
Nice.
Yeah, so the idea was, I think we've always been big fans of kind of alternative Indian cinema, and Money Call is kind of like so important and critical to kind of the experimental avant-garde side of kind of Indian cinema. So it's a very we felt it was a very kind of apt title as well, very catchy as well, and kind of fitted into kind of our kind of ethos and spirit, or kind of what we want to do with the label. Is that we are interested in genre films at the same time, but we're also very much kind of focused on kind of independent, kind of alternative, esoteric, marginal kind of films that are out there, which often don't get, a platform and don't get seen by kind of film audiences and, and collectors as well. So it kind of came from our kind of appreciation, understanding, and love of kind of Money Call's kind of work, really.
It's a noble mission. It's something that is vastly underserved across many of these boutique labels. Ranjit, you guys are focusing on South Asian cinema, primarily Indian cinema. Obviously, there's a very big hole missing in that market. But one question I'd love to hear is, why has that classically been so underserved or difficult to license for many of these other companies?
It's really fallen away as a market. I mean, growing up in the UK in the 80s, the actual South Asian communities, and in fact even other immigrant communities. So I'm from the Midlands. Omar, you're from the north, and there's sort of decades-old South Asian immigrant communities in those areas in the UK, but also the Chinese community in Liverpool, the Turkish community in Berlin and parts of Germany were at the forefront of the VHS home video market in the 80s. They set up their own stores, and as well as renting out the latest blockbusters, they also imported a lot of stuff from their home countries. So I grew up, weekly visits, multiple weekly visits to the local VHS store, renting a whole load of not only latest releases, but old movies from the 40s and 50s, as well as the latest latest US blockbuster that was available on video as well. Yeah. So I think there's always been a market in terms of people wanting to watch this stuff. What's really changed over the last few years is I've noticed whenever I visit India in the past, even up until maybe about 10 years ago, you could pick up really good quality like DVDs of your classic favorites and really cheaply, and they were very well made, and they had English subtitles, and they were decent copies. And that has pretty much disappeared, I would say, in the last 10 years. The only way you can get your hands on this is usually sort of bootleg copies from like local grocery stores and mobile phone stores, where it's sort of 3 films to a DVD, not even a DVD, like a VCD, like really low res sort of YouTube rips. Because no one's interested in this stuff. It's all available on streaming. All the major streamers have sort of entered the South Asian market now, and often this stuff, particularly I think during the pandemic, went straight to streaming effectively. However, there is I think what surprised Omar and myself when we just started teasing the idea of even doing this is there's a huge sort of demand for this regardless. I'd love to get a lot of these films on home video and watch them. I'd love to have all the extras. I'd love to have the lovely artwork. And I suppose why is it still underserved now? I think there's also a sort of opacity, I would say, a sort of a mysteriousness about how do you license this stuff and how do you source this stuff, that Omar and I have sort of tried to solve in our various ways as curators. And so that's given us the network to be able to sort of crack that a little bit, crack that open, not just for ourselves, but for other curators, for venues, for maybe other labels as well. So I think it's a combination of that sort of market completely changing over the last 10 years, but also for those people who are interested, just having no idea how you find these films and how you license them.
Yeah, it's been really interesting to see people react to some of the major releases, especially from that part of the world that have hit, like Mondo Macabro in the US that put out the Bollywood horror box set, and seeing the people literally like fall in love with the cinema as they finally get to watch through the films. What has really made me excited about this is you both seem uniquely qualified to tackle this. Omar, what kind of backgrounds do you guys had that has led to the professional ability to be able to tackle something as grand as this?
Yeah, I think just to go back to what Ranjit was saying, I'll just kind of echo his sentiments about kind of, I think what's happened in India is that the home video kind of market has collapsed. There's a kind of void now, and it's kind of like an abyss. And a lot of films, I mean, Netflix, Amazon Prime, all of these kind of streaming sites have an important role to play. But unfortunately, I think even though they do hoover up a lot of the independent kind of films and put them on their kind of platform, it can be sometimes difficult to even find those films if you want to kind of watch them as well. So there's challenges there with kind of the algorithm, which has been talked about endlessly by many different kind of people, which I think is still the case. But I think now, as curators, I think what we discovered is that it is difficult to find those films and license for them. But I think once you kind of get into that world and start speaking to people and banging on doors, it kind of is really kind of critical. But kind of going back to what you just said about kind of my background. So my background is very much similar to Ranjit's in terms of like film curation and programming. I initially started as a teacher, so I was teaching film media for 15 years at Sixth Form College, teaching kind of filmmaking, storyboarding, film analysis. So I did that for 15 years. I left, and then I went to University of Manchester, did a PhD. So I got funded by the Arts Humanities Research Council to do a PhD, and my interest was very much in parallel cinema, Indian parallel cinema, so independent kind of film movement. The first one really in India, in South Asia, post-colonial one in the late 60s, early 70s. So I kind of researched that. So I spent a bit of time in academia. I left that. I'm in a different role now, doing something completely different to kind of film. But the whole kind of film kind of fixation and obsession and passion was always in the background. It's something I was always kind of doing on a constant basis. So in 2017, I founded one of kind of the North's first regular kind of seasons on independent kind of films, which is based at home in Manchester, which is one of the Northwest kind of like most important kind of cultural kind of spaces for showing independent films. So I founded a season called Not Just Bollywood. So each year we've been trying to show a slate of different kind of alternative independent films to audiences, do Q&As, do other work around it, introductions, so try to kind of broaden kind of audiences kind of ideas of what Indian cinema, what South Asian cinema is to them, because I think it's still looked at through the prism of kind of Bollywood and the way in which kind of film culture often kind of represents and prioritizes kind of the mainstream films is often at the expense of kind of the more interesting kind of films that often fall to the wayside and no one kind of really engages with. So I think I've always been an avid collector myself in terms of Blu-rays and DVDs as well, and VHS. I remember the first VHS I bought was, I think it was Batman and Die Hard from the local kind of, either it was Boots or Woolworths. And I remember, it started very early, that kind of relationship with physical kind of media. And I think for me, and I think for Ranjit as well, it's been really, really fundamental to kind of keeping a lot of these films alive and keeping them going, because streaming is one thing, but it can't replicate what physical media does, because it gives you the actual quality of the film. It gives you all those special features. It's like vinyl. You pick up a piece of vinyl, you pick up the album, you immerse yourself in that whole experience. You're reading the notes, you're listening to the tracks one by one. You're not skipping when you are on Spotify and stuff. So I've always loved that kind of culture and the investment and the time that goes into producing all these Blu-rays. So I'd always look at them and go, wow, it's incredible. Why isn't there something like this for South Asian cinema? There should be, because it's such a huge kind of, still is a very kind of gap in the market, really. So, and I always would tweet about it, write about it, and my gripe would be, why Criterion? Why aren't you releasing all these, Indian films? Same for kind of like Arrow, and I think it was a Masters of Cinema, Eureka. There were moments where those boutique labels have flirted with the idea of kind of releasing Indian films, but they've often gone down the route of strategic rare films, which is, the classic kind of default position, just release a rare film and we'll be okay. And I think when I spoke with, I remember speaking with Nick Wrigley, who I think was involved with Masters of Cinema Eureka initially. I think he works on Indicator and Powerhouse and stuff now. And when I said to him, look, why you only released that one Ray film, which was Abhijan, and it was on DVD, and said, come on, let's do some more. There's so much stuff out there you could release. Yeah. And I remember the comments coming back with that there's just not an appetite there. Audiences don't want to buy these films. But this was admittedly, I think, 10 years ago. So it was like a decade ago. But I think there is a significant audience out there who would want to purchase, South Asian, Indian films on Blu-ray, have them on their shelf in the way in which, Criterion, Arrow have kind of given them these releases. I think I'd say I'm and Georgie, I'd say we're pretty qualified to kind of do this project.
What about you, Ranjit? What's your background like that got you here?
I come into the film world pretty late in life, so I'm a businessman as my day job, and that's what pays the bills. But actually, I think this is probably the first project where it sort of covers all the bases in terms of my experience, because we're setting up a new business effectively. So I've got all of that background. I know what to do. I know how to set up a limited company. I know how to get an accountant and all that sort of stuff. Done it before plenty of times. But on the film side, it's something I got involved with really as a supporter to begin with, about sort of 8-9 years ago, just attending all of the different DIY film clubs and independent venues and film fests in London. There was a real sort of renaissance of that, a while back, which is continuing today, thankfully. And just giving them moral support and creating a social media account to promote all of these great things that are happening. And as a punter, as an audience member, I also sort of picked up on, what went well and what didn't go well, and what I was looking for in a really good curated event. And as part of that, I got invited to do some myself as well, because just sort of talking to people involved in that world and supporting behind the scenes, I suppose sort of people picked up on the fact that I love cinema myself and all forms of it as well, and were interested in my choices and in putting them on in venues and talking about them and doing all the sort of extras as well. So I started out as a film curator screening Octopussy, the Bond film, under a railway arch in East London, in like a real sort of hipster area of like upcoming East London. And it was a proper hipster venue, because by day it was a vinyl shop, and they also had like a pop-up restaurant. And then during the evening, they'd clear away all the crates, and there'd be a set of steps, brick steps, that people would just sit on, and a screen would come down, and they'd just put on films in the evening. Unfortunately, they lost their license, but while that venue lasted, it was quite a cool place. And the guy who was like inviting guest curators there was a chap who used to run a sci-fi theatre in London, which was a great little film club when it lasted. They used to do a different sci-fi film every month, and some real cult films and rarities in their program. But what they would also do is they would get an artist to do a specially commissioned poster and postcard for it, and they would get a scientist related to the topic of the film to do a little talk. Wow. And it was great. Shout out to Graham at Sci-Fi Theatre, wherever he is. And it was a great little film club. They started off in like the back of a pub, and then they sort of branched out to actual cinemas. And so he invited me. So look, there's an independent venue here. They're sort of pretty much open to you doing whatever you want. And I thought, okay, well, out of all of the things that I'm probably never going to get invited to do, I'm going to do something called Turban Scene on Screen, where I did a whole monthly set of screenings about films where there was sort of notable leading or sort of side characters that wore turbans, and particularly sort of male Sikhs, and particularly for the first 3 or 4 films that resonated with me growing up. So, Octopussy, The English Patient, and The Life Aquatic, the Wes Anderson film. So those were the first 3 films. And then as I sort of got into putting on the event, I did everything around it as well. So I've managed to get Kabir Bedi, the guy who plays the henchman in Octopussy, to Skype in from India and actually introduce the film. And that was a coup for my very first screening. And it sort of went on from that. I had live music for the Wes Anderson film. I managed to find a British singer-songwriter who knew Portuguese and who could sing the David Bowie songs in Portuguese, just like in the film. And we had a little concert for 30 minutes before the screening. With the English Patient, I managed to find a British South Asian filmmaker had done a documentary about Sikhs who served in World War II, and so we got a little bit of education to go with the film to say, actually, this is a real thing. This is this is a great sort of form of representation. So what started off as a sort of bit of fun on the side, sort of slowly as the screenings developed and I started doing midnight double bills, I started sort of branching out in all sorts of all sorts of crazy films that I love to watch and share with other people. Is over the years I sort of somehow accidentally became an expert at it. So all the stuff that I thought was like super difficult because I'm a nobody who just doesn't know how to do this stuff, apparently was super difficult for everyone. And just by doing it year after year, I've sort of somehow sort of cracked it, and I try and share that with as many people as I can, because I think the more people who are able to do this, the better for the film ecosystem. So I get invited every year to talk to film curation students at the National Film Television School here in the UK, and I try to mentor as many sort of up-and-coming film curators as I can in terms of just linking them up with, this is the contact you need if you need to license a film from this archive, or this is a contact for a venue if you're thinking of doing your program there. because I think the other aspect as to my background and why I love doing what I do is I think London compared to other European cities and certainly the big US cities, so like New York, LA, and then sort of Paris, Rome, Milan, Zurich, it just doesn't have it doesn't have the sheer amount of sort of repertory film going that you'd expect for the size of population. It has a lot. There's a lot going on, and there are some fantastic venues here. But you just look at some of these other cities and you visit them and you think this is sort of, if you scale that up to London, we're nowhere near what's happening in New York and Paris. And so I think in that void of big cinemas or institutional film institutes and the like sort of doing this stuff, it's the DIY community, it's the film club putting on a DVD in their local library or church hall are sort of filling that gap, and I'm sort of glad to be part of that community, really.
That is incredible. I mean, you've been curating supplements for releases for a long time, basically, it sounds like, in a live fashion, which is immense. One thing that makes this whole home video interesting and needed in 2025 more than anything, I think, is those contextual extras that you literally already doing. So who are some of the companies that have been inspiring you guys that you're going to be trying to live up to some of these supplements when you release your films?
Well, if I can just say a shout out to some of the anonymous companies first, because as a film curator, if it wasn't for, so for example, I screened like an old French black and white film. If it wasn't for the fact that a Korean distributor had put that out on DVD, I wouldn't have been able to get a decent copy of it. So it's similar to, I think I've got it near me. Just give me a moment. Like I'm screening this film later in the year. It's a British film called Our Mother's House with Dirk Bogarde. Now, I've managed to license this from a major sort of licensing firm, but you can't get hold of it anywhere. So it's only because there's this archive collection DVD of it that I'm able to screen it at all. And I'm not sort of a format snob. If I have to screen it on some 90s DVD, I will. It's better than not screening it at all, quite frankly. I don't want to be sort of tied down to just what's coming out the latest restoration circuit, although I am thankful for all the sort of new restorations that are coming out. I don't want to just be sort of bound to that. So a shout out to all those 90s DVD producers and 2000s that and their stuff is still circulating on eBay, and if it wasn't for them, quite a few of my screenings just wouldn't have gone ahead. In fact, even the screening of The Cloud Door, which our label is named after, if it wasn't for the German producer who had commissioned Money Call to make that unusual erotic short film for his compilation DVD called Erotic Tales Volume 1 that I think was published in the 90s, of which I have a copy, you wouldn't have been able to even see that film because you can't get hold of it any other way. There is no high definition transfer of that. So a shout out to all the anonymous labels first, and then in terms of these days, I mean, I'm a big fan of what Vinegar Syndrome is doing in the US. I mean, there's just if I could afford to import everything, I would, but I have to sort of pick and choose. I think out of their sort of sub labels or partner labels, I really love what Canadian International Pictures is doing.
They're incredible,
and I love the packaging of it as well. They pick really good artists.
Yep.
They have really good extras on there, and they are sort of genuinely films that no one else would otherwise release. So they're there may be limited editions, but I think those actual artifacts will live on for decades as a way of curators being able to access that material in a good format enough to potentially screen. In the UK, we have Radiance Films that are doing a cracking amount in terms of just getting things out there and making things available. Omar, I'll hand over to you. You're a big collector. You're a much bigger collector than I am.
Yeah, no, I think you mentioned who did you just Radiance? Yeah, I think the usual suspects really is kind of like things labels like Criterion Collection, Arrow. I think Second Sight are doing some great stuff as well. I think in terms of where we're headed, in terms of like South Asian, Indian kind of cinema. I think Second Run has been really important in the work that they've done here in the UK. So Melly Modi, who kind of founded and set up Second Run, is still going. They still release a lot of really important Eastern European kind of films, but they've also had a concerted effort. I think they've not been. I think they've done brilliantly to release whatever they can in terms of the South Asian films. So I think a couple of films from Adur Gopalkrishnan. I think they've done also just recently one that I've kind of written the essay for the booklet. I forgot what the film is now. Ishino has been released, which is a Manipuri film, and also most recently as well they did the Govindan Aravindan film Tampu, The Tent, which has also been released by them. So I think Criterion, Arrow, Second Run are really important. So a lot of those kind of labels, but I think those labels have been consistently brilliant in terms of their authoring of their kind of discs, in terms of their booklets, artwork as well. I think those are the things we want to kind of aspire to and kind of been paying very, very, very kind of close attention to as well. I think it's a growing market though. I think every time I kind of look and go online, I'm seeing a new kind of label emerging. I think A24 are putting out their own stuff now, which is like a beautifully kind of packaged, and kind of the love and care and attention that kind of goes into all of this is really something that I think we want to kind of aspire to, and hopefully we can.
The fact that you guys are listing details on your Kickstarter page that are transparent and things that matter to people that are buying these, like authoring by Fidelity and Motion, you can tell that you're immersed in this world. You know what you're doing. What were, when you were setting out to make decisions on these, what were some of the just really obvious, this is absolutely what we have to have on every single release type of decisions?
So when we were really starting out, we knew nothing, quite frankly. So sort of the origin story would be, I think, Omar, it was your tweet. You posted online basically saying, hey, what if I started a label on North Asian cinema? And like, you got a huge response. Well, one of the responses was me like messaging you saying, cut me in on this. I've been thinking about this for years. Let's do it. And but we literally knew nothing. I mean, we had contacts. We were, we bought home video. We were users. We were customers. We knew about the licensing angle from screening this stuff, and I suppose we've got our film knowledge in terms of, we know which films potentially would resonate in terms of the ones that we would like to release. But we literally knew nothing about how do you actually create a Blu-ray? Like what are the steps? And we had to sort of piece it together, jigsaw piece by jigsaw piece, over about, it took us a year, didn't it, Omar? I'd say, okay, you got to author it, you got to get the materials, you got to get this, you got to get that, or get the packaging. The manufacturer is a different company. There might be a broker between you and the manufacturer, but all of this stuff. And the people in our network were like really, really helpful. And I think it's probably down to that original point in terms of everyone wanted something to happen in the space, the South Asian space. So everyone has been really willing us to make this work. And because of that, they've been super generous with their contact books, with their advice, with their tips. Either other labels, for example, or people in the world who are collectors who tell us from a customer perspective, what do you look for when you buy a Blu-ray? What do you actually what do you sort of care about in particular? And they tended to be the same things that we cared about. So that's sort of, okay, we're on the right track then. And I suppose, Omar and myself have our sort of particular strengths. Omar's great with the copy. He's written a book about parallel cinema. He can be an expert on all sorts of releases. And I suppose my background in terms of the event side, branding, packaging, commissioning artists. I was able to go out to my network in terms of, can you help us with a logo? Can you help us with a custom slipcover and all that sort of stuff? So I think between the two of us and our sort of contact books and the generosity of people we knew, we sort of pieced it together bit by bit. And I suppose what do we care about, and why does that come out on the Kickstarter is what we want to do, and this is aligned with my programming as well, is we want to sort of break South Asian cinema out of a sort of ghetto, basically. We don't want people to see it as it's this niche thing.
Right.
It's just a genre. It isn't. If you look at it, it's 1,000 genres. It's expansive. And we aspire as a label to do, the latest release versus something from the 1940s, a mainstream national cinema to an obscure experimental film, documentaries as well as fiction. We don't want to sort of, tie ourselves to a particular subpart of South Asian cinema. And therefore we want those picks to be published in a way that is seen as devoting the same sort of love, care, and attention that those types of cinemas would receive if they were an Italian film or a Japanese film or a Hollywood film. Therefore, it's not just the picking of the film, it's the way that we're presenting it. And therefore, we want the custom artwork, we want the slipcover, we want the Scanavo case that sort of, has a full frame sort of artwork on it. We want the extras. We want to try and get cast and crew involved, because that if we were a customer and the film was available in that, we would say wow.
Right.
And we want the people to receive this to really love it.
That's a dang fine mission. I'm all about that.
Yeah, sure. I was just going to go back to what Ranjit was kind of like add some more kind of points. I think he makes a lot of really important points, but also it's important to stress that this is something we've just kind of been doing in between everything else. So we've got families, right. We've got kids, we've got day jobs, so we're trying to getting this in like late at night or wherever we can, a little bit of time, work on the kind of bits on the label. So it's been tricky in that respect. And I think what Ranjit has said is really important in terms of like the generosity of what kind of people kind of willing to say and help out and say, this is the person to speak to about this, particular aspect of the label, the next step. So people have been really kind of helpful and generous with their kind of time. So I think it's been a learning curve for us as well. I think we've learned so much along the way in terms of from where it kind of starts and where it's going to kind of end up as well.
Omar, why don't you tell us about this first film that people can look into on the Kickstarter and what your first release will be of?
In terms of the film, so the reason we've kind of chosen this film, we feel, and it is considered to be the most kind of one of the most important cult films in India, really. So there's a kind of real kind of cult audience out there for this film. I think it's a really important film in terms of, so I've written a book on Indian parallel cinema, which looks at the history of the movement from the 60s up until the mid-90s. And the director, Kamal Swaroop, who's really important to the movement, who trained under Mani Kaul as well, worked with and collaborated on a number of kind of films, very much kind of bit of an anomaly as a filmmaker, I would argue. And Om Dar Bidar is a very kind of anomalous film as well. I was going to describe the plot, but I can't. I was going to say this is the story about this young boy called Om growing up in a village in Rajasthan, and he can do like weird and strange things like holding his breath for a ridiculous amount of time. But it's kind of like, it's very much a kind of a fever dream of a film, really. It's kind of tied together with many different kind of surreal sequences. But there's nothing quite like it in Indian cinema. When you do watch this film, it kind of gets under your skin and you start thinking about film as well, but you start thinking about kind of Indian culture, about kind of history, about politics, about science. It makes you think, and it kind of opens your mind. So it's kind of, it was weirdly enough, it was kind of like the way in which it was marketed very much as a kind of like a LSD kind of trip, psychedelia kind of experience, which it is actually, depending on how you watch the film and what kind of mood you're in as well. So I think this is and Kamal Swarup has been really generous with his time as well, and kind of like when we kind of approached him initially, said we're going to, we want to release Om Dar Bidar as a kind of as on Blu-ray. He's been really, really kind of instrumental in kind of making sure it does happen as well. So it's important to avant-garde experimental cinema in India, but also the history of parallel cinema. It's a really, really critical kind of film in terms of cult kind of cinema in India as well. So I think those are some of the reasons why we feel it feels like an appropriate kind of first release. I know Ranjit is a huge fan of the film himself. He can talk more about, he has shown the film himself, I think a couple of times.
Yeah, I think the film has only been screened 3 times in the UK. That the first time I was in the audience, it was at the London Film Festival. It was a recent restoration that was doing the rounds of the sort of film festivals, but it only got screened the once, as far as I know. And then I got hold of it, screened it myself, and I invited Omar along, and we did a double bill of Roger Corman's The Trip with Kamal Swarup on the Bidar. And we talked about that sort of circular connection of the Roger Corman's film sort of tapping into that sort of world of Leary and sort of Tibetan philosophy and Indian philosophy, and sort of marrying that up with this sort of chemical substances that can sort of achieve the shortcut to enlightenment. So using Indian philosophy to sell drugs, and then this sort of restoration marketing where there was a great sort of pull line on the poster that this was the great Indian LSD trip. So using then a sort of an American film trope, which was used, in other films as well, like Kubrick's 2001 was I think on the poster, like this is you're going on a trip, this sort of this idea of experiencing a film in a cinema as a sort of mind expanding experience, then being applied to this otherwise very unclassifiable film. Because how do you sell this film otherwise? It doesn't fit into any genre or type. Right. It doesn't conform to any sort of expectations. So I found that fascinating as a sort of connection on a double bill basis. And then the third time that I know that it was screened was one of the students that I met at the National Film and Television School actually was doing a season and wanted to screen it. And he'd actually studied under Kamal Swarup in India before he came to London, and I connected him up with the archive to get it licensed. And in fact, that was the first screening of the film done under the terms of our new license. Because I suppose the other thing to talk about is we're not just a label; we want to be a film licensing service as well. Because as curators, one of the biggest frustrations we have, not just with Indian distributors, but I get it with French and Italian and other distributors as well, is some people just don't understand the economics of indie cinemas. You want to screen a film in a 40-seat tiny little micro cinema, you can't charge hundreds and hundreds of pounds or dollars because you're never going to make the money back. And they're used to only having their films screened at major festivals, like a one-off screening. They'll make a few thousand, and then that's it. It will never be seen again. Whereas we're very much interested in how do we get dozens of film clubs to screen this film to micro audiences, because that's how you keep the memory of a film alive, and that's how you keep sort of film culture alive, is actually screening it and talking about these films. Right. So our deal, and hopefully all our future deals, will be not only do we want the license to put this out on home video, but we want a flat, affordable rate that small cinemas and film clubs can then actually screen this as well. So and we've secured that with Om Dar Bidar, and we've had one screening under that license. So he was very pleased to get a decent rate.
That is a very important part of this. One thing that has, even just from the first time that you both started talking about this online, it felt like the start of something special. It felt like something that this is people advocating for an entire movement, an entire generation of film that had not had not free access, but like even the ability for people to truly discover. And yeah, the way you describe that is immense. I'm so appreciative of that. And to tie it to one other thing on your Kickstarter, you use a very specific word that I immediately fell in love with, and I want to hear what it means to you, because on your Kickstarter you list South Asian films and diasporic films, and that is, I don't know, as a white male in the United States, that is one of the most privileged people in the world, and not knowing what, dealing with diasporas is not for me personally, but I work in immigration, and it means the world to me to hear somebody talk about this. So what does that word mean to your guys' mission?
For us, I think the focus is not just going to be on, films from South Asia, but we're very much interested in those filmmakers who are active within the South Asian diaspora, not just here in the UK, but also in the US as well. Because I think a lot of those films, the South Asian diaspora films, have also, rarely ever get screened and are not available to access as well. So I think we kind of want to kind of keep it as broad as possible as well, to try be able to kind of consider and think about films outside of just kind of, the canon, so to speak, as well, and start thinking about kind of diaspora kind of filmmakers here in the UK as well. And there is quite a lot actually here as well, in terms of like what we can access from the different kind of archives that are available as well. A lot of the stuff, some of it has been digitized and is available kind of through the BFI as well. But then there's a lot of filmmakers who just, once again, people might not know about them, and collectives as well, people might not know about them as well. So it's another opportunity to think about and make their kind of work access as well, accessible to kind of cinemas as well, and to audiences. So there is a broader kind of a cultural kind of aspect to what we're trying to do as well. And I think what Ranjit was saying about kind of making these films kind of accessible to kind of cinemas as well is fundamental, really, and kind of sits quite importantly alongside what we're trying to do with the label, in terms of getting the physical kind of media out to kind of to audiences as well. I think it is important, because I find every year whenever I try to curate something, I come across so many kind of barriers when it comes to discussing and negotiating with cinemas, because they just can't get the fees that some of these distributors and licensee kind of rights holders are asking for. Is just simply extortionate, and it just doesn't work, and it's not practical in kind of the economics. That model that was there before is not sustainable now, so it's very much the lower the fee, the better it is, really. I think that's what we're trying to do with Om Dar Bidar. I think is going to be kind of like hopefully open the door, and other people we're hoping will also take note, because I think a lot of Indian distributors based in India who've got offices around the world don't really understand the dynamics of kind of the way in which audiences work, and also what cinemas are facing, independent cinemas are facing, so many cuts and so many kind of budget issues, and audiences kind of are changing as well. So there's many different factors and dimensions to the way in which Indian distributors and license holders kind of sometimes close their eyes to and just oblivious to. So I think our model, hopefully, once it's kind of put into practice, we're hoping kick open a door for kind of other people to take note as well. So we're in this very much for kind of film audiences, and it kind of, I'm going to say educating kind of audiences, but kind of really kind of broadening kind of their understanding of kind of what South Asian cinema can be, really.
It's important. So looking at the future, I know that a lot of people that have never started a label, which is most people, don't necessarily grasp that you can't just start and put 5 films out a month. It's literally not a feasible thing unless you are inherently grotesquely wealthy. So what are the future plans for the Cloud Door?
Well, to your point, we're starting with the very conservative ambition of one in our first year. Like, if we can do just one, then at least it's sort of, we'll get an all-round experience of what it actually takes to get, because we've done the theory, we've got everyone lined up, we've got the supply chain all sort of in place, everything budgeted, but we've got to actually do it now. And rather than just assume it's going to be a breeze, we've said, okay, we're going to give ourselves a year even just to get this release out. So hopefully, if people are seeing this and the Kickstarter is live, bear with us. I think we've put a date of March next year. I think that gives us enough time, hopefully, to get all the extras filmed, get all the authoring done, get it all manufactured. I think also it's a good test because it's all very well getting the sort of fantastic response online, but it's only once people actually buy or pre-order the stuff that you really know it's viable and that it has legs long term. And fingers crossed it does. But yeah, we won't be scaling up massively in the short term. Like let's get one done. Right. It'd be great if we could move to 3 or 4 a year. If this is viable, if it generates enough income that we could get some other collaborators or partners or staff on board, then maybe you can scale up even more. I mean, there are literally thousands of films that we could potentially access, but it's definitely going to be a slow start. Establish the label, establish the brand, establish whether it's even viable, learn how to do it. Before we sort of ramp up massively, if at all, because it may be that due to our other sort of commitments, we've got to keep it fairly boutique. But we've already got a slate of sort of other films. I mean, well, one thing that's been really amazing is filmmakers actually just reaching out. We haven't even got a label yet, and filmmakers are contacting and saying, "Hey, have you seen my film?" And we'd love to get out of it because. To our earlier point, the filmmakers want their films accessible too, and often the archives that they deal with or the distribution deals that they have with, they're just not interested in putting this stuff on. They've got to deal with Netflix. It's out there, it's done, and they're not interested in the home video market at all. But the filmmakers are, because they want their film to have a life. They want their films to live on in some way and not just get deleted off a hard drive in 10 years' time.
Yeah, that is a very sad point, but very, very true. I mean, to keep it in the sad moment for just a couple seconds, is a lot of these films, because they've never been served appropriately on home video like this, filmmakers are not going to be here much longer, and we need some people to capture some of these voices, to get that context down for archiving more. I mean, yes, it is vastly important to archive the film, but hearing somebody speak on the process and what led to the creation of that is a massively important part of that.
Yeah, I think I just want to mention somebody here, which is the Film Heritage Foundation in India, which was set up a few years ago by Shavindra Dunganpur, who very much is at the forefront of film preservation in India right now. So I think they've got 2 films right now at Bologna, Il Cinema Ritrovata, which they're playing. And I think they've made it a mission of theirs whereby they restore at least 2 or 3 films a year now in either 2K or 4K, and done brilliantly, because they are now setting the benchmark in terms of restoration. Working with Bologna, obviously, you're going to get the best kind of possible restoration. I think what Shavindra is really kind of emphasizing and kind of underlining is that there's this incredible history of Indian cinema, so many films out there, and it's mind-boggling and bonkers to think that the Citizen Kanes, the kind of the Gone with the Winds of Indian cinema are just not available on the way in which they should be, and appreciated and seen in people's kind of homes and even in the cinemas as well. It just doesn't exist. And it's just crazy to think that we're in that situation still. So I think ultimately we want to kind of be able to get to that point where we can release these films, which are accessible for people, but using the best kind of archival kind of materials that are out there. And the Film Heritage Foundation is doing exemplary work in terms of making and restoring a lot of these films. And one of the things they're doing actually this week, they're having a discussion on restoration at Bologna, Film Heritage Foundation, and they're talking about Chaulet's restoration, which they're doing right now, which is a long time coming, probably, still one of the arguably the most famous kind of and popular Indian film ever made. Can you watch it on proper kind of Blu-ray right now? No, you can't access it. And it's so sad, but it is changing, and it is taking its time, but it's happening, and it's great and exciting to see it, that it's finally happening. And a lot of, even the National Film Archive in India have started to realize that they have to hold on and restore these films, because they're going to lose so much of the history now. And I think we can play a really important part in kind of becoming a conduit in terms of getting those films to collectors, to people who kind of want to watch these and own these films, because Mother India deserves to be on the same shelf as Citizen Kane and, the phone, Truffaut and God and everyone else. So I think it's important in terms of film preservation is really is starting to kind of turn a corner in India as well, which is great to see. I think that's going to be important for us as well in the future.
Absolutely. Is there anything I failed to ask about that you guys want to share before we call it a day?
I suppose I just want to add to what Omar said in terms of I think we sort of accidentally hit the right timing for this for this launch, in that the number of sort of 2K 4K restorations that have just starting to appear out of India is quite remarkable, which potentially means if this first release goes well, there will be a really good pipeline in terms of films that could be potentially available to us. And Shavindra at the Film Heritage Foundation has been great in terms of connecting us to rights holders and others, even just on the screening side, let alone sort of discussions on the home video side. The film, the NFDC, as they were formerly called now, the part of the NFAI, that's the National Film Archive of India, have been amazing in terms of like understanding what we're trying to do, because it is a completely different model to what they're used to. So getting them over the line as the sort of first archive that we're working with, they have hundreds, thousands of titles, and some really really sort of famous ones, but some really like quirky ones. They were telling Omar, I remember we were having a discussion with them, and they're telling us how they digitized a whole load of like children's films in their archive, like educational films, and I'm really interested in all that sort of stuff. It's this is stuff that people won't even be aware exists, let alone will be sort of asking for sort of screening rights or home video rights for. So I'm keen that we do a bit of that as well. Maybe there's a box set of children's films out there waiting to be released at some point.
That'd be fun. I really wanted to end this on sort of a hopeful note, and for this again, not really a genre, because this is just an area of the world that has not been served properly. Not a genre. What are 2 or 3 films each that you could recommend that people seek out to get a sense of what you not necessarily hope to release, but just people to see, hey, these are the type of films that are amazing that I could potentially be missing if something like this is not funded, if something like this is not supported, if something like this is not seen as important to so many of us that are in the film circles that we're in.
Can I just start by saying one way would be, maybe check out our film curation. So My film club is called Superkino. That's SUPAKINO. If you look on my website, superkino.com, you can see all the films I've screened in the past, and amongst the sort of weird and wonderful films from around the world, there are quite a few Indian films as well. So check those out. Films like Jag De Raho, which I put on a double bill with Scorsese's After Hours, because they're both set in a single night and have some very similar themes. So Jag De Raho is up there as a top film to seek out. But I'd also check out Omar's movie blog, where he's got like tons of films that he's written about over the years, which is now a book. So check out the book as well. But if you just want to read it online, there's a great blog in terms of film that Omar has written about as well. There you go. There's the book.
Is that still in print? Can everybody still purchase that?
Yeah, it just came out in February, so this is the hardback, but it's an absolute extortionate price, so don't buy it. So the paperback will bankrupt you.
You're really bad at promoting, by the way.
Yeah, don't buy my stuff. Yeah. So the paperback is out next year in January, and it'll be like 10 or 12 quid, so I don't know how much that probably is more accessible. I think it'll be like, $10 or $15 in the US. Yeah. So if you want a kind of a different canon of kind of Indian cinema, what I do in each chapter is I list a canon, so of films that you need to go and seek out, and parallel cinema films, which can put a completely different spin on your perspective of what kind of the linear kind of way in which Indian cinema is often kind of taught and kind of processed and delivered to us through kind of film culture. So this is a kind of a different way of thinking and looking at kind of Indian cinema. I think it's kind of what we want to do with the label as well, really, in the sense that we want to shake up things and make kind of audiences think about the non-linear way of Indian cinema as well, because there's so many different branches and so many different dimensions to it, and the regional kind of stuff out there as well is incredible as well. So yeah, I would say have a look at this. I could list loads of films, but I'm not going to. But just go to this and my blog as well, which is Movie Mehul, which I've been writing on there for a number of years. There's, I have stopped over the past year because I'm writing a book on. So I'm doing a book on Uski Ruddy, which is a Moneygall's kind of debut film, which is going to be part of the BFI Film Classics range.
Nice.
So I've been working on that as well. Actually, Uski Ruddy would be one I would strongly encourage and recommend for listeners, and to go and kind of seek out and watch. It's a really important film.
Well, I would recommend everybody go support your Kickstarter. I will be there day one to give. I know it's something that is really easy to say, hey, everybody come do this, and not put your money behind it, but I absolutely will be. I think this is one of the most important things for physical media, for home video, and really just for South Asian cinema for this entire year. So thank you, guys.
Hey, thanks so much for having us. And yeah, and I've been checking out your other shows as well. So this has been, I think your library of previous shows is like a really good grounding for anyone else who wants to start up a label as well.
I'm quite proud of the people I've been able to speak to, and to have you guys be in that catalog for me is immense. So thank you so much.
No, thank you.
Cheers. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Disconnected Podcast. There's one big thing that you could do to help the show, and that is to leave a rating and review on the podcast service of your choice. Thank you.
Do you love movies? So do I. What's up, y'all? It's KB, and I love movies. Inviting you to listen to The Conversation, a film podcast where passion meets perspective and opinion. From the old school to the new, I invite a guest on to discuss the movies that thrill us, challenge us, break our hearts, or even blow our minds. There's always new episodes dropping wherever you get your podcasts. So join the conversation. We don't just watch movies. We love talking about them too. The Conversation with KB Loves Movies, a part of Someone's Favorite Productions podcast network.
Thank you for listening. To hear more shows from the Someone's Favorite Productions podcast network, please select the link in the description.
Having a life scholarship and being able to afford to go to college made me feel inspired to go.
When I got a life scholarship, it was such a relief.
I knew that I wanted to have an impact. Having a life scholarship through the SC Education Lottery was huge. It gave me the opportunity to make that impact right here at home.
The South Carolina Education Lottery. A better you, a better us, a better South Carolina. Visit sceducationlottery.com/betteryou.